All right, welcome. Today, we're diving into a big word that holds some even bigger ideas, eschatology. You've probably heard it called the study of the end times. And in this explainer, we're going to break down one specific and really influential way of looking at what all that could mean.
So what exactly is eschatology? Well, at its core, the word itself comes from Greek, eschatos, which literally means last things. So it's the study of how history is supposed to wrap up, and for our purposes today, we're looking at how our source material unpacks these final events from a biblical perspective.
Now you might be thinking, why are we talking about the future when there's so much going on right now? And you know what? According to our source, that's kind of the whole point. This study of the last things isn't about escaping the present. It's actually a direct response to all the anxieties we're feeling. You know, the political chaos, the social unrest, even worries about the environment. It's a search for a bigger framework to help make sense of it all.
So let's really dig into that why. The source material lays out a few key reasons for this kind of study, and they're not just for intellectual exercise. Nope, they're meant to have very real, practical effects on how a person actually lives their life day to day.
The first motivation is a really powerful one. It's all about hope. The idea here is that looking forward to a future that's believed to be divinely planned can give people a sense of hope that goes way beyond the struggles and frustrations of the here and now. It's about seeing past the immediate problems to an ultimate resolution.
Okay, the second reason builds right on top of that.
And it adds a sense of urgency. This isn't about just sitting back and waiting for things to happen. Instead, trying to understand these signs of the times is supposed to be a wake-up call. It's an encouragement to live with intention, with purpose, like every single moment really matters.
And that brings us to the third core motivation, which is accountability. Our source suggests that this study is also a reminder that there's a future accounting for one's life. This belief is meant to motivate people to, get on with their earthly assignment, with the understanding that their actions have a lasting, even eternal significance.
Okay, so that covers the why. But what about the how? I mean, how do you even begin to interpret texts that are thousands of years old and filled with symbolism? Well, our source lays out a very specific toolkit, a set of principles for how to approach and read prophecy.
And here are the big ones. First up, the literal first rule. The approach is to take a passage at face value unless doing so would be completely absurd. Second, context is absolutely king. You use the whole text to help understand the different parts. Third, and this is a big one, avoid speculation. The source is very clear. Trying to pin down exact dates is a no-go. And finally, stay open. The idea is to remember that the timing and the way things unfold might be totally unexpected.
All right, now we're getting to the what. This leads us to the specific theological framework that our source material follows. Now, it's a bit of a mouthful, I'll give you that, but it is the key to understanding this entire worldview.
The term is dispensational premillennialism. Okay, let's break that down because it sounds way more complicated than it is. Basically, it's a way of looking at all of human history as a series of different eras, or dispensations. And in each of these eras, God is seen as interacting with humanity in a distinct way, all part of one big unfolding story.
And this is what that timeline looks like. You can see how this view breaks history into these neat stages. It starts with innocence and conscience way back at the beginning, moves through periods of promise and law. According to the source, we are currently living in the dispensation of grace, often called the church age, and all of this is leading to a final stage, the kingdom. It's really a complete map of history, from the very beginning to the very end.
So what does this framework say is coming next? Well, according to the source, there's a whole sequence of major events to look for. Things like the rapture of the church, a 7-year period of intense global crisis known as the Great Tribulation, the rise of a single, powerful world leader called the Antichrist, then the second coming of Jesus, and after all that, a literal 1,000-year reign on earth.
Sometimes one of the best ways to really get a handle on a particular viewpoint is to understand what it's not. So our source actually helps define its own position by showing how it differs from other interpretations that it disagrees with.
So, a major contrasting view is something called preterism. And the key difference, really, it all comes down to timing. As we've just seen, dispensationalism sees the prophecies in the book of Revelation as literal events that are mostly still to come. Preterism, on the other hand, argues that most of those events already happened, that they were symbolically fulfilled way back around the year 70 AD with the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem.
So as you can probably guess, the debate over when the book of Revelation was actually written becomes a huge deal.
Another view this source sets itself apart from is called dominion theology. This is the belief that it's the church's job to essentially Christianize the world's governments and institutions before Jesus can return. The source material we're looking at has a different take. It sees the kingdom as a spiritual reality right now and argues it only becomes a literal physical kingdom on earth when Christ himself comes back to establish it.
And all that brings us to our final big picture question. We've walked through the what, the why, and the how of this one particular framework for understanding the future. But what it really all boils down to is this, right? How does any deeply held belief about what's coming end up shaping our actions, our hopes, and our entire sense of purpose right here in the present? That's something worth thinking about.